Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, I'm just getting to grips with the fact that I was unsuccessful in getting tickets for the Glastonbury Festival next year. But with 2 million people registering to get tickets, it was always going to be an uphill struggle. And I remain hopeful. And we'll try again next April for the resale of return tickets. But as a music fan, I'm fascinated by how technology is changing music in ways that you possibly didn't know. For example, did you know that an artist only gets paid if someone streams their song for more than 30 seconds? Certainly something for everybody listening to think about the next time you hit skip when a filler track comes on. But these data insights are changing the way artists make music. No more long, slow intros, because today's audience wants to be hit with the hook straight away. Instant gratification at its finest. And as the industry changes, a company called Entertainment Intelligence is changing the way the music industry collects, views, and utilises data. AI, as it's more commonly known, is unique in its ability to seamlessly blend information, including social, playlist, sales and consumption data from a limitless number of sources, tracking and analysing information at breathtaking speed and removing data silos. So if you love music and you love technology, you should love this one. So come and join me in London here in the UK so we can speak with Greg Delaney, the founder and driving force behind data analytics platform Entertainment Intelligence. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Greg. Can you tell the listeners a little more about who you are and what you do?
Hey, thanks, Neil. Good to chat. So yeah, originally I was co-founder of CrowdSurge, the fan club ticketing company. So we did world tours for Paul McCartney and all of Warner's artists like Chili Peppers, etc. And after leaving there, really felt that data or collating the data in one place was probably one of the biggest problems we always had, getting it from different sources. So originally EI, Entertainment Intelligence, was founded around that, and then started working with Essential Music, building their catalog management system at the same time, and really became apparent that streaming was the big pain point. So that's end of 2013, start of 2014, and yeah, it was pretty obvious that was going to be where the real pain was. So we moved into that, and we now collect about 170 million rows of granular streaming trends data, plus video, download, social metrics, etc., for independent distributors and record labels. We also get the metadata, so we get that from Fuga or Consolidated Independent or Audio Salad. Basically, we're DDEX compliant, so we get all the releases and new releases before they come out, etc. And we attribute the data to the tracks and whether they're on EP or single or a product, etc. So that's in a nutshell what we do.
And without naming any names, I've got to ask, from your former rock and roll story there, was any rock and roll stories that you accumulated over the years that you could share, or is it all locked away?
a few horror stories probably, but yeah, no, it's interesting actually that CrowdSurge was actually born out of the fact that small promoters just didn't get any sway with Ticketmaster or C or any of the big ticket companies. I had an interesting email, won't name names, but from a promoter and a ticket company talking to each other about how many tickets they wanted to set aside for the artist manager for secondary ticketing. And, it was fairly apparent that there were a lot of people making noises about how disgusting secondary was while also profiting quite nicely from it. So, like I say, without naming names, I think there's always underhand deals, but it's an interesting world. It's a shady market, I tell you.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And for people hearing about Entertainment Intelligence for the very first time, because that's where we're here to talk about today in 2019, what is it and how is it changing the way that the music industry views and interacts with data?
I suppose because we collect the granular data, so we're not a scraping service. We're not collecting publicly available data. And I think that's the key differentiator is understanding what what granular data is. So we're contracted through our clients, so people like Domino, Concord, Mushroom, Sub Pop, etc., and then through distributor clients like Xelon or Zibvolution or Secretly Canadian, etc. So we're their official data management company. We integrate directly with the DSP or the vendors' APIs, so Spotify, Apple, Deezer, Google, Pandora, YouTube, and we collect things like the listener, their location, the device, age, gender, playlist, source of stream, etc. So yeah, that's the key difference between us and maybe a scraping service, and then we serve that up on dashboards and reports, and we have sort of triggers and analytics that hopefully help people understand their global streaming market. That's really what our service is, and we're independent, so we're not a distributor or an aggregator or a delivery company or an artist management company. We're just purely data management reporting for the industry.
And data plays such a huge part in the music industry now. For example, I recently heard a podcast that talked about how digital is completely changing music and how it's created by artists, because they only actually get paid if their song is played for more than 30 seconds on Spotify and Apple Music, etc. So can you paint a picture for listeners of just how vital data is to musicians now?
Yeah. So, for instance, we get the sub 30-second streams from Spotify. In the past, that was never available. And it's really important because, as you say, you don't get paid, and also you don't get notified if someone streamed your song but skipped it before 30 seconds. So now that we get that number, you can very quickly see if in the past you might have just shrugged and said, oh, it doesn't seem to be getting the traction, or you might have spent a lot of money trying to push a song thinking that no one was hearing it or being exposed to it, when actually they were just skipping. So now being able to see that and go, oh, hell, we've got a problem here because people are skipping the song right at the beginning, is really important. It stops you flogging a dead horse, or makes you look at your marketing differently, or targeting your audience in a different way. And actually, on that skip subject, it's also understanding that radio pluggers and playlist curators are really not interested in a song that's not getting at least 80% completion rate. So the other end of skipping, if it's played, you also need to make sure that the song is getting played all the way to the end, or at least 95% of the song is getting played. That's in streaming terms, that's classed as a completion. 95% of it was played by the listener. And you need to be 80 or above, more like 85% of that audience needs to be listening to the whole song before a radio curator or a plugger is even going to look at it. So there's two ends of those skips, and both of them are important to measure and to use as ammo. That's how you go to bat on a track, getting it out to market, and understanding how people are consuming it.
And there are so many DSP dashboards out there on the market at the moment. So what makes entertainment intelligence unique from all those other solutions out there, would you say?
Well, most of them are provided by the services themselves. So, Spotify for artists, Apple for artists, great. They're great platforms, and they do some really cool stuff, but they're in isolation. So if you wanted to look at how a particular artist or track or album is doing in Southern Africa or in Asia, you'd need to log into the appropriate platforms, collect the numbers, collate them together, add them all up, and then go, okay, Deezer's outperforming Apple, Apple's doing slightly better than Spotify or Google, etc. If you can get it all in one place, then you've got a better idea of how they're performing. It saves a lot of time and effort. And you can start to spot trends or opportunities. Basically, it's almost like getting a scorecard or a school report for the DSPs. So if you can look and go, you can actually go back to them and say, look, Apple's outperforming you in South Africa. What the hell? Come on, Spotify or Deezer, what are you doing? So you've got the ammo, you've got the evidence, and you've got it all in one place. So that's the key difference. And like I say, it's granular data, so it's not It's not a general, this is the overall market. I mean, that's fine. People like to see what the market's doing, and there's lots of press around the industry's doing great or the industry's doing badly. But to most people, they don't really care. They just have to get on with marketing their products. So actually having your hands on the real numbers and what your super fans or your fans are really doing is what's really important. The rest of the time, it's just fluff. It's just vanity metrics, and it's really just people trying to market a solution that isn't actually that useful. And the other thing as well is we have data sharing. So when you collect data as a distributor or a label, you can also give your label clients or artist managers or PR companies access to just part of that data. So it might be just the artists they manage, or just the albums that they're promoting, or just the labels that they own if you're a distributor. So that's a very powerful part of the system as well.
And I'm curious, as this is a tech show, what kind of technology are you using to obtain that rich portrait of just how listeners all around the world are actually interacting with music?
So we keep every record. We don't archive it. We don't aggregate it, which means we can start doing cross-matching and historic data. And we also get the identifiers. So we get the source of stream, so playlist, artist page, radio, private collection, and the devices as well. So we're now getting things like smart speakers, in-car, games console, smart TV. And even that's interesting, just watching the shift now from smart speaker and now seeing games consoles are really kicking in. A lot of kids will put on streaming music while they're gaming. My son and his mates, they like the pathos or whatever of playing Frank Sinatra at the same time as playing a shoot 'em up or something like that. So takes all sorts. But yeah, so the technology, we can see what technology people are using, and we can use our technology to actually start to match that. And we're now moving more into machine learning and stuff like that to do more advanced analytics as well.
And another stat that I read, which I found incredibly intriguing, is that most people never unfollow a playlist, which means followers, for example, is not a useful metric for artists. So was there anything else that surprised you?
Yeah, the growth in personalized or algorithmic playlists, has a really positive impact, especially for independents. Resist as they might, curators will always be influenced by the powerful forces in the industry. I'm not saying it's payola, but they can't help having being aware of what's trending. Whereas a computer working purely on audience preferences and reactions is going to push a lot more content to the fore that maybe didn't enjoy it in the past. So an example of that is one of our clients. They were saying that Aussie Barbecue, it's a popular playlist in Australia, no surprises there. But Mushroom Records actually said that they were seeing much broader range of music featuring on that particular playlist. And on top of that, they were generating more income from that playlist since it went algorithmic. So in the past, it was always there was always that feeling that it was a little bit of a closed shop and it was more major label content, or it was more about who had a better marketing team pushing. Whereas now the computer just goes, people like that, I'm going to give them more of what they like, and actually spread it quite broad. And so that's real evidence coming from the dashboard to a client who have then feeding back to us going, we're getting more money and we're getting more artists played on this particular playlist because the computer now dominates. So yeah, that was an interesting insight that we saw.
And there really is so much insight that data unveils. And one of the things I read, I think, was how a large indie label noticed something strange was happening in several Eastern Asian markets with just one particular song. And listeners in Japan and Korea all seemed to be skipping at the exact same point. Meanwhile, in Central Europe, listeners kept streaming away. I mean, can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, it was a doozy. We had a large UK label came to us, and they're a bit concerned that there was quite a lot of skipping going on in a certain area, but they couldn't really see what. So with the platform, they broke it out. They looked at the length of play in each territory or each country, and then they were able to see that it seemed to be all the Asian countries seemed to be skipping at exactly the same quite harsh guitar piece, whereas the Northern Europeans, the Germans, etc., loved it straight through and saved. So they actually were looking at whether they could do a remix to try and re-engage that audience because they liked a lot of their other stuff by that band, rather than just throw the track away. Think, oh, okay, let's adapt it for the audience. So yeah, that was quite an extreme case of getting right down to the almost by the not even by the minute, by the second, as to where people and what was the problem. So yeah, that was an interesting one. It was good fun digging into that.
Yeah, a great story. And of course, with so many streaming services out there, it sounds like these walled gardens for each platform are just creating data silos. So can you share a little bit more about how you're going to change that, or you're planning to change that, or maybe you even already are changing that with entertainment intelligence?
Yeah, so like I say, we collect Spotify, Apple, Deezer, Google, etc., YouTube. We also pull in social metrics like Facebook and Twitter. And now we're in discussions with other services to start sort of matching things like live and touring data, radio play, even with Pandora, which we do collect. We do get some traditional radio as well. And again, being able to pull all of that into one place, but then start saying, well, with the metrics and the benchmarks that we generate, if others contributed their data, we can give back those benchmarks. So it's a give and take. And rather than people saying, well, I'll hold this data because that's my competitive advantage and you're not having it. It's like, well, yeah, but you're not actually aware of what's happening over there, or you're not benefiting from the collective. And independents are now growing at such a speed. You know, we saw that article the other day about Sweden. The indies were matching the majors now for content. And streaming volumes, and that's just going to keep growing. We've had a lot of labels leave the major label market and go independent. People like Sub Pop and that are all now through us and through direct delivery masters of their own destiny. So it's going to carry on, and if people don't work together, others are going to find that their own business model starts to collapse around them because they're not collaborating.
We're now reaching that time of the year where we're looking towards the following year, and it's 2020, which sounds odd even just saying that out loud. But what's your main focus for 2020?
It's got a nice ring to it, though, hasn't it?
It does, yeah.
Yeah, when saying things like the noughties or the tens or the tensies, or 2020 sounds good. So maybe that bodes well. Yeah, I think with the massive volume of data that we've got, and we store everything. 2020 is really about leveraging that for the benefit of our clients and the artists they serve. So generating income out of that data through brand engagements, live touring activity, etc. There's a lot of value in that data. And if you look at how sports teams use their data, how retail have been using it for years, the music industry could be doing a lot better with that information, rather than just using it to look at their current audience, but actually looking at who would want to engage with us. A good example of that is a brand wanting to get Little Mix or someone like that to even mention the name of their product. You're talking 100K minimum just for them to say the name. Mm-hmm. I remember actually, I think it was one of their YouTube shopping videos at Christmas was a bigger hit than one of their singles on YouTube, which is quite worrying. But anyway, but if a brand wants to work with an indie who has actually probably more engaged audience, because it's not chewing gum, it's not stuff that's just flowing past their ears and they're not really engaging with the band, a brand could work with them for maybe 10K rather than 100. So there are opportunities out there, and I think data will help to unlock those opportunities. Can't go into too much detail, but we've got a couple of partnerships that we've already agreed that we're just finalizing at the moment, which will come out in 2020 around advanced payments and advertisement placements based on data as well. So that's all exciting stuff for the new year. And then just putting our data and benchmarks through machine learning to generate a scoring mechanism that we think will prove more useful to artists than traditional charts. And we've mentioned this a few times, but if you're in position 900 and you want to know who's in 910 and who's in 890, in other words, who's around you and around your hemisphere, but you're not in the top 50. Using those numbers to know who's doing well, who's doing better than me, what could I do to improve, is going to be a much more useful chart to artists than, like I say, than the top 40 or something like that. So that's a big step for us next year as well.
It's a fascinating topic, it really is, and something I could talk with you for absolutely hours about. And I suspect that for many people listening, they're going to have a few questions after listening to our conversation today. So could you remind them of where they can find you online, and also contact your team if they would like to contact you guys?
Yeah, sure. Well, our website is ent-intel, intell.com, and the email is disruptors@ent-intel.com. So that's probably the easiest way to get hold of us. We've got a Facebook page and Twitter as well. So yeah, we can bore the legs off you when it comes to data.
Well, I do find it completely fascinating, especially how music is evolving and how we access it is evolving. And I wonder if the Pink Floyds and Radioheads of this world would be able to survive if they came out now with, when they've got to grab their audience with a chorus almost within that 30 seconds and yes, grab them, because it's changed so much. But a big thank you for highlighting that and sharing your story with me today. Thanks again, Greg.
No problem at all. Absolute pleasure, Neil.
Wow, what a great story. And upon investigating further, I read some great insights from Greg, who said that wild data is out there and it can run free and evolve. But in walled gardens, the data will never evolve and we'll never get better guidance. So we need to let the data out of all the proprietary silos and private databases and let it cross-pollinate and evolve. What a beautiful way of putting that. I think Greg should be a writer, don't you? Wise words indeed from Greg there, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Will it make you think twice before skipping a track, now that you know it could determine if the artist gets paid or even gets played on the radio? And how do you feel about that? As always, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes, and pop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. So keep those messages coming in. Remember, we're approaching 1,000 interviews this week, so a huge week for the podcast. So make sure you come back for the celebrations. But a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.